What does it mean to be a hero? Is it about risking your life for others? Or is it about the choices you make when no one is watching? This is a story of a firefighter, a man who ran into flames without hesitation. And a stray dog, alone, scared, and with no one to call home. Fate brought them together one fateful night. But neither of them knew that this rescue was just the beginning. Because sometimes, the life you save might be the one that saves you. Ethan Calloway had seen many fires in his years as a firefighter. He had pulled people from collapsing buildings, battled infernos that threatened entire neighborhoods, and witnessed the raw power of destruction. But nothing in his career compared to that one night, the night he disobeyed a direct order. Risking everything for a life most people wouldn't have even noticed. The call came in late, just past midnight. A fire had broken out in an abandoned house near a residential area. When Ethan and his team arrived, flames were already consuming the structure, sending thick plumes of smoke into the cold autumn sky. The fire crackled and roared, illuminating the night in a violent orange glow. "It's an abandoned building. No residents inside." The chief's voice came over the radio. "Focus on containment. Make sure it doesn't spread to the neighboring homes. No unnecessary risks." Ethan acknowledged the command and moved into position with the others, directing powerful streams of water at the flames. The fire was relentless, but they had handled worse. This was just another routine job, at least. That's what Ethan thought until he heard it. A faint, desperate whimper. He paused, his heart tightening. At first, he thought he had imagined it. But then he heard it again, a weak, panicked cry, barely audible over the crackling fire. He turned toward the sound and spotted something small, huddled behind a half-collapsed doorway. A dog. No, a puppy, thin and covered in soot, trembling in fear, its dark eyes locked onto Ethan's, wide with desperation. His grip on the hose tightened. "Damn it." Ethan pressed his radio. "I see a dog trapped inside. I'm going in." The response was immediate and sharp. "Negative, Calloway. That building is unstable. Get back here now." Ethan hesitated, his training battling against his instincts. He knew the risks. The house was old, its framework already weakened before the fire. It could collapse at any moment. But as he looked at the puppy, alone, terrified, he knew he couldn't turn away. Orders be damned. He made his decision in an instant, tightening his helmet and sprinting forward before anyone could stop him. The heat was suffocating as he crossed the threshold. Smoke coiled around him, thick and blinding. Every breath burned his lungs. The walls groaned, and the roof above creaked ominously, threatening to give way. His mind screamed at him to turn back, but his legs carried him forward. The puppy whimpered, pressing itself against the charred floor, too terrified to move. "Easy, little guy," Ethan said, his voice rough but gentle. He crouched down and reached for the dog, but it flinched, its body quivering violently. It didn't trust him. The fire was closing in, swallowing the room inch by inch. A wooden beam overhead groaned loudly. Ethan didn't have time for hesitation. "Come here, buddy," he coaxed again, this time lunging forward and scooping the small creature into his arms. The puppy struggled for a moment, but as soon as Ethan cradled it against his chest, it stilled, as if sensing the safety in his grip. "Hang on," he whispered, turning on his heel. He sprinted for the exit. The smoke was even thicker now, the heat almost unbearable. Flames clawed at his boots as he navigated the burning wreckage, dodging falling embers. Each second felt like an eternity. His lungs screamed for air. If you've made it this far, don't hesitate to hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let us know your thoughts. Just as he reached the doorway, a deafening crack split the air. Ethan barely had time to react before the ceiling above him gave way. Instinct took over. He dropped to the ground, shielding the puppy beneath him as debris crashed around them. A blast of heat washed over his back, the impact rattling his bones. For a few agonizing moments, everything was silent except for his pounding heartbeat. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. The entrance was still there, but the collapse had blocked part of the path. He was trapped. A voice crackled in his earpiece. "Calloway, are you in there? Answer me." Coughing, he pressed the radio. Still inside, he gasped. "Blocked in. I've got the dog." There was a pause, then an urgent reply. We're coming for you. Stay put. Ethan looked down at the puppy. Its small body pressed against his chest. Its tiny heart hammering as hard as his own. He could feel it shaking. But its eyes, once filled with fear, now held something else. Trust. He tightened his hold, whispering, I won't let anything happen to you. Minutes felt like hours. The heat grew worse, the walls creaking under the strain of the fire. Just when he thought he might not make it, voices broke through the haze. Calloway, we see you. Hold on. Through the thick smoke, figures emerged, his team, rushing toward him with axes and hoses. Relief flooded him as they hacked through the debris, clearing a path. Strong hands grabbed him, pulling him up and out of the inferno. As soon as he stumbled onto the pavement, fresh air filled his lungs. He collapsed to his knees. The puppy still clutched tightly in his arms. Around him, his team shouted orders, working to suppress the fire. A sharp voice cut through the chaos. Calloway. Ethan looked up to see his captain striding toward him, his face a mixture of anger and relief. You disobeyed a direct order. The captain snapped, but then his gaze flickered to the small, soot-covered puppy in Ethan's arms. He let out a long breath, shaking his head. Damn it, Calloway, you could have been killed. Ethan coughed, struggling to sit up. His entire body ached, but he barely noticed. The puppy stirred in his arms, blinking up at him. For the first time, its tail gave a weak wag. But I wasn't, Ethan said simply. The captain exhaled sharply. Take that thing to the medics. And next time, think before you run into a collapsing building. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked down at the tiny life he had saved. A firefighter knelt beside him, offering a blanket, and Ethan gently wrapped the puppy in it. A few residents had gathered nearby, murmuring amongst themselves. An older woman stepped forward. I've seen that dog before, she said. It's a stray. Been living around here for a while. No owner, no home. Ethan looked at the small creature in his arms. Homeless, alone. No one had ever come for it. Until now. You're a lucky one, he murmured, scratching behind the dog's soot-covered ears. Guess you just found yourself a new home. The puppy looked up at him, eyes filled with something Ethan hadn't expected, gratitude. A firefighter nudged his shoulder. So, what's the little guy's name? Ethan thought for a moment, then smiled. Sparky. The team chuckled, and Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. As he sat there, the weight of the night settling in, he realized something. Saving that tiny life hadn't just been about the dog. It had been about himself. And though he didn't know it yet, Sparky was about to change his life in ways he never could have imagined. After that fateful night when Ethan pulled Sparky from the flames, he knew there was no way he could let the little stray go. Something about the way the dog had clung to him, even in fear, made Ethan realize that they were bound together by something deeper than just circumstance. He took Sparky home, bathed him, and fed him properly for the first time in who knew how long. The little dog was hesitant at first, flinching at loud noises and cowering whenever Ethan moved too fast. The trauma of nearly being burned alive had left scars on him, just as it had on many of the people Ethan had rescued before. But patience and kindness worked their magic. Day by day, Sparky became more comfortable. He followed Ethan around the house, curled up at the foot of his bed, and eventually, after weeks of uncertainty, he started wagging his tail. The first time Ethan took him to the firehouse, the crew instantly fell in love with him. He's a tough one of them said, rubbing the dog's head. Survived that hellhole all by himself. Maybe he should join the team. Another firefighter joked. At the time, it was just a joke. But as time passed, Ethan realized it might not be such a crazy idea. It started one day when Ethan and his team were running a search and rescue drill at the firehouse. They had set up an obstacle course designed to simulate real-life emergency scenarios, collapsed walls, thick smoke, and hidden victims for the firefighters to find. Sparky sat nearby, watching the exercise with an intense focus. His eyes followed every movement, his ears flicking with interest whenever a firefighter shouted out a command. Then something happened that took Ethan by surprise. One of the firefighters, who was pretending to be trapped under simulated debris, groaned loudly as part of the exercise. Before Ethan could react, Sparky leapt into action. The little dog darted across the training ground, nose low to the ground, zigzagging through the maze of wooden planks and obstacles. He found the trapped firefighter in less than a minute, barking frantically and pawing at the ground near him. The team stood there, stunned. "Well, I'll be damned," the captain muttered. "That dog's got better instincts than half of us." That was the beginning of Sparky's training. Ethan worked with him tirelessly, teaching him to follow commands, recognize different scents, and locate people in simulated disaster scenarios. He reached out to professional canine search and rescue trainers, who were impressed with the dog's natural ability. Sparky took to the training like he was born for it. Soon, he wasn't just Ethan's pet, he was an official search and rescue dog. A hero in his own right. It was a call like any other. A warehouse fire. Late at night, reports said the fire had spread rapidly, trapping 2 workers inside. The team knew it was going to be bad even before they arrived, just by the glow of the flames lighting up the night sky. By the time Ethan and his crew reached the scene, the warehouse was an inferno. Flames licked at the roof, sending embers into the air like a storm of fire. Smoke poured from every crack, thick and black, making it nearly impossible to see beyond a few feet. "This one's unstable," the captain warned. "We move fast. We move smart. No risks. We go in, get the workers, and get out." Ethan nodded and turned to Sparky. "You ready, buddy?" Sparky barked once, sharp and focused. They went in. The heat was suffocating. The moment they stepped inside, it was like walking into an oven. Even with their gear, Ethan could feel the fire pressing in, threatening to consume everything. Sparky moved ahead, his small body weaving between fallen debris, his nose working through the acrid scent of smoke and chemicals. Minutes felt like hours. Then, Sparky barked, urgent and sharp. Ethan followed and found the first worker, trapped under a fallen shelf. The man was unconscious, his face streaked with soot. "Got one," Ethan shouted into his radio. The team worked quickly to free him, dragging him outside to safety. But there was still one more person inside. "Sparky, find them." The little dog took off again, disappearing into the thick smoke. Ethan followed, his heart pounding. Every second mattered. Then, another bark. Ethan sprinted forward and found the second worker slumped against a wall, barely conscious. The fire was closing in, and the floor beneath them was already weakened. Ethan hoisted the man onto his shoulder, turning for the exit. Then, the ceiling gave way. A massive support beam came crashing down. The impact sent Ethan sprawling, the worker slipping from his grasp. The fire roared around them, embers showering down like burning rain. Pain shot through Ethan's body. He was pinned. The radio on Ethan's shoulder crackled. "Callaway, status." He pressed the button with trembling fingers. "Trapped," he coughed. "Can't move. Too much debris. Static." Then, "We're coming for you. Hold on." But Ethan wasn't sure how long he could hold on. Smoke was filling his lungs, making each breath harder than the last. His vision blurred. His limbs felt heavy. And then, through the haze, Sparky, the little dog, was just beyond the wreckage, barking frantically, his eyes wild with panic. He clawed at the debris, trying to dig Ethan out. "Sparky," Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "You have to go." The dog ignored him, digging faster. "Sparky, listen to me," Ethan gasped, his strength fading. "Get out, now." But Sparky wouldn't leave. His paws scratched desperately at the debris, his small body shaking with effort. Ethan felt something deep in his chest tighten. The dog was refusing to leave him, just like Ethan had refused to leave Sparky behind all those months ago. But it wasn't working. The debris was too heavy, the fire too strong. Time was running out. Sparky seemed to realize it too. For the first time, his frantic digging slowed, his body trembled, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. His ears flattened against his head, and his tail curled downward. Ethan swallowed hard. "Please, buddy, you have to go." Sparky hesitated. Then, without warning, he turned and ran. Through the smoke, through the fire, he disappeared. Ethan felt his heart shatter. He wanted to believe Sparky was going for help, but a part of him feared the worst. That the little dog had finally given up. That he had abandoned him. Alone in the burning wreckage, Ethan let out a shuddering breath, his vision going dark. The fire raged on, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. The heat pressed in from all sides. His lungs burned with every shallow breath, and the weight of the debris crushing his body made it nearly impossible to move. The fire roared like a living beast, devouring everything in its path. He could hear the distant shouts of his team, but their voices were muffled, lost in the chaos. For the first time in his career, Ethan wasn't sure he would make it out. He had always told himself that every firefighter knew the risks. Every call could be their last. But he had never truly imagined what it would feel like to be on the other side, trapped, helpless, waiting for someone to find him before it was too late. And then, there was Sparky. His last memory before everything went dark was the sight of the little dog standing among the wreckage, desperately clawing at the debris. But then, Sparky had run. Had he left? Had he given up? Ethan wanted to believe his best friend hadn't abandoned him. But as the fire crept closer, licking at the edges of his vision, doubt seeped in. Maybe this was it. Maybe the fire had finally won. Outside, the firefighting team was in a frenzy. They knew Ethan was somewhere inside, but the fire was too intense, the smoke too thick, and with the building structure collapsing, finding him in time felt almost impossible. "Calloway, do you copy?" The captain's voice crackled over the radio, met with only static. The team had thermal imaging cameras, but the heat from the fire was interfering with them. There was no way to pinpoint Ethan's exact location. They were running out of time. And then, through the smoke, through the chaos, something appeared. A small, soot-covered figure darted out of the burning wreckage. "Sparky," one of the firefighters gasped. "It's the dog." The little dog didn't hesitate. He barked sharply, tail whipping back and forth with frantic urgency. Then he turned and ran back toward the fire. "Wait, he's leading us somewhere." The team exchanged quick glances. They had seen Sparky work before. He had found people trapped in burning buildings before. If Sparky was trying to tell them something, they needed to listen. Following Sparky, the team pushed deeper into the blaze, using every bit of cover they could find to shield themselves from falling debris. The dog weaved through the wreckage, his nose to the ground, his body low as he maneuvered through the thick smoke. Then, he stopped. Sparky barked again, pawing at a collapsed section of the building. The firefighters didn't waste a second. "Calloway, if you can hear us, we're here." No response. "Get that debris off now." Axes and crowbars slammed into the collapsed structure. Firefighters working at a desperate pace. The fire was dangerously close. But none of them were leaving without Ethan. Then, a sound, a faint cough. "He's here." With one final push, they cleared the debris and there he was, Ethan Calloway. Battered, barely conscious, but alive. Sparky whined and rushed forward, nuzzling against Ethan's face. The firefighter let out a weak, exhausted chuckle, his hand slowly reaching up to touch the dog's soot-covered fur. "You came back," he murmured. Sparky let out a soft bark, his tail wagging despite his exhaustion. "Calloway's breathing but weak. We need to get him out now." With careful hands, the team lifted Ethan and carried him through the inferno. The moment they emerged from the flames, medics swarmed in, placing an oxygen mask over Ethan's face and checking his vitals. Sparky refused to leave his side, even as they loaded Ethan into the ambulance. The little dog tried to jump in after him. All right, the paramedic chuckled. "You're coming too." Ethan spent the next few days in the hospital recovering. He had suffered from smoke inhalation, several bruised ribs, and minor burns, but he was alive. Sparky stayed with him the entire time. Every time Ethan woke up, the first thing he saw was his little companion curled up at the foot of his bed, ears twitching whenever he stirred. "You saved me, buddy," Ethan whispered one morning, scratching behind the dog's ears. "I owe you my life." Sparky licked his hand in response. The story of their rescue spread quickly. News outlets covered it. People called it a miracle. The dog who had once been rescued from a fire had now turned around and saved the very man who saved him. Ethan wasn't interested in the media attention. All that mattered to him was the quiet truth. He and Sparky had saved each other. A week later, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. The entire firehouse welcomed him back with cheers. But the loudest greeting came from Sparky, who launched himself into Ethan's arms the moment he stepped through the door. The captain clapped Ethan on the shoulder. That dog of yours. I hope you realize he's officially the bravest damn firefighter we've got." Ethan laughed, rubbing Sparky's head. "Yeah, I think he always was." Sparky wasn't just a pet anymore. He wasn't just a stray who had survived a fire. He was family, and from that moment on, Ethan knew, no matter what fires they would face, no matter how dangerous the future would be, he and Sparky would face it together. What do you think about today's story? Do you believe situations like this can happen in real life? If you have any thoughts or feedback, feel free to leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting stories. See you in the next video.